in circumstances where it's so overwhelming and we feel like there's almost nothing left to be hopeful for, like
Sure.
the feeling of feeling dead inside, you know, or suicidality. How can we better deal with that feeling in that moment?
When the person or
the person.
The person,
Let's
yeah.
start with the person.
Again, going in, I'm thinking from my therapist hat again, right? Like if I'm sitting in front of someone who says, I've lived through this, and though I've survived, like I'm physically sitting here, I feel dead inside, right? I think that I would reframe that by saying, one, that's okay, right? And that perhaps that part of you needs to die so that you can move on.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Right? And then what does it look like for you to come alive again? And maybe not as that same person, but in a new way. Yeah. How can you redefine who you are? How can you recreate new experiences? And how can you begin to make meaning for yourself from this day forward, right? And not necessarily having to go back to that or reclaim that or do anything with it. Maybe if that's what works for you to say that part of me, that version of me is no longer, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when we're talking about healing, again, with it, not only is it an ongoing process, it's a very personal and intimate process, right? And so if that's what you need to feel whole again, who am I to tell you that that's not the way to do it? Like, my perspective as a professional is that I'm a professional, but you're the expert. You're the expert on you.
Yeah.
You are the expert on your experiences and your dreams and your fears and your hopes. Like that's all you. So I come with tools and resources and ideas and interventions to support your process. And so if you tell me in order to move forward from this, I need to kill that part of me or that version of me, we can have a full ceremony and lay that person to rest and we can move on.
Yeah.
Like if that's what you want to do, I am so with it. As long as it's not, dangerous. Right. And so when you talk about suicidality, I think same process. I think, so I get it, right? Someone says they want to kill themselves and our first reaction is to be like, no. And that's really our own death anxieties coming up.
Yeah.
That's our stuff. And so the work of being empathetic is getting out of your stuff and accepting someone else's without it, not adapting it, not adopting it as your own, but accepting it as theirs and not trying to force it to look like yours. So because you have some death anxiety, someone else says, no, I'm ready to be out of here. You're like, no. And it's like, hey, you know what? Right. I know some of your story. You've shared with me. Thank you for trusting me with that. And I can understand based on what you shared, how it might feel like dying is your best or only option. Right? And be with them in that space of like, I get it. It's hard. You're scared. There's pain. All these different things that make you feel like dying is probably better. And then that gives them a second to really kind of sit with that notion. And the other thing that I like to do is ask, is it that you want to die? Or is it that you want to escape the pain or the fear or the pain? Right. Because if it's that you want to escape that, there are other ways to escape it without having to die.
Yeah.
Then, because a lot of times for people, suicide feels like the last option.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's my best or only option. Like this is it. There's no other. And because the circumstances are so big, the event is so big, their responses and how it lives in their body and their minds are so big, it can be blinding. So that's all they see. So as a person that they trust enough to share this story with, because the truth is, a person who's really going to go through with suicide,
they're not going to say anything.
They're not going to tell you. Right. They're just going to do it. Right? Which is why when we hear the stories, we're like, no one knew. We had no idea. Because people who are really going to do it.
Or the process that it took for them to get to that.
Yes,
right?
they're out of here.
Right.
But the people who speak about it, they're subconsciously, they're looking for a way out. They're looking for someone to say that doesn't have to be. But the way you say it can change everything.
Yeah.
if you validate and say, I understand why that feels like an option for you, then it's like, I'm seen.
Yeah.
I'm accepted. I belong. I'm heard. I matter.
I matter.
Those are the things that people who don't want to be here or who feel like suicide is their those are the things they want to hear. So when you validate those feelings of not wanting to be here, sounds like counterintuitive, but when you say, I understand why dying feels like your best option, they go, oh, you get me. You see me.
Yeah.
And that instantly is what every human being is looking for, to be seen and to be accepted. And when you do that, immediately a lot of the weight that makes them feel like death is the best option is lifted. And then they're able to open up their minds and eyes to see that there are, in fact, other ways to navigate this.
And if you are a person that, we talked about how we self-regulate and how we can deal with trauma within ourselves and how to even identify it and find ways to work through it. But how do you identify it in somebody else? How do you realize and recognize that somebody might need help?
Sure. Yeah, so some of the things we talked about earlier, that hypervigilance, like if you notice that somebody is kind of like extra paranoid and they jump around a lot, or they're always asking a bunch of questions, who's going to be there, what time is it, where, like they want to know all the details, that is an indicator that they're trying to control the situation. And a desire to control, again, comes from that feeling of being out of control.
Yeah.
Right? When the thing happened to you, so you want to have your grips on as much of the information and details as you possibly can to try to manipulate it to make sure that you don't find yourself in a position where you're being taken advantage of or damaged or hurt in some kind of way again. So when you have friends who are maybe like asking a million questions and who's going to be there and what time and how is this and all of that, it's like, okay, what is going on? And again, being mindful, because it's so easy to get annoyed by that.
Right.
If you're not thinking, most people are not thinking with a clinician brain. Right. Going like, these are signs and symptoms. Like they're not doing that, right? Like most people are just like, we just want to go out. Why are you asking all these questions, right? And then it feels like I'm attacked. You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to go because I can't be in control of it, and then y'all don't really get it, and I don't. So you know what? I'm gonna chill at home. Right? And so when someone is sort of asking those kinds of questions, always trying to be in control of the situation, always sort of head on the swivel, where are we, what's going on? It might just kind of like raise an eyebrow a little bit like,
Yeah.
And then you think of them. If you know this person, you know something that happened to them that they may not have even connected to. Yeah. The fact that they are showing up in these sort of hyper aware, borderline paranoid kinds of ways. The reactiveness. Yeah, they shared a story with you about something that happened. They were in a house fire and now they don't like to be, don't lock the door or, things like that. They may not even recognize.
Absolutely.
So, just being, if you find the person shows up and they're kind of hyper aware, always looking around, questions, trying to control, might just be a clue that like maybe there's some underlying trauma there and they're like trying to work out how to stay safe in a situation. Yeah. How
do we help, to your point, if a loved one is experiencing either a panic attack or have overcome, trauma and is suffering? How can we be there for them?
Safe space.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I meant.
Validate.
How can we be a safe space for them?
Validate.
Yeah.
Right. Because, and what I mean by validate is when their emotions come up or when they have the hypervigilant response to the situation, don't shame them. Cause can you imagine like you're with someone and then all of a sudden they're triggered and they just like run screaming cause something scared them and you don't understand what happened. And but now you're embarrassed. And so you're like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do? And then you're shaming them, right? You don't even realize it. So, what I mean by creating a safe space is validate them, right? And when they have feelings or memories or they're triggered, create space for their process. Remind them that they're safe, right? and say, it's okay, I understand, because they're going to intermittently remember different details about the event because, again, that part of their brain was shut down. Something could trigger and remember, oh my God, that was the sound the clock made right before I got hit in the head. And that sound triggers, and then all of a sudden they're going into that. Create space for that process. Say, it's okay, I understand. Not necessarily that because I understand and have lived through what you've lived through, but because I understand that you've lived through it, that is going to be a process for you to overcome it. And I want to make sure that when you're in my presence, you know that process, it doesn't have to be rushed. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be on my timeline. Any of that.
Right.
This is about you being whole again.
That's so good. And like, what do you say to people that always assume that people should be over it, especially with traumatic people describing or wanting to share that they're struggling or suffering?
That's a really, really tough one. The get over it is like, I can't even. That's such a tough question because you can, again, like I was saying earlier, you can never know what people have lived through. Yeah. You can never know. And you can never know the loss that it caused them, the pain that it causes them. Like, you can never know. So the get over it is just, that is just incredibly tough for me to hear. And if the question is, what do I say to the people who would suggest that someone who has lived through trauma just get over it? I would say, do yourself and them a favor. Just don't be in their life. Like, if you can't be empathetic enough.
That, right?
Yeah, if you can't be empathetic enough to understand, I'm not saying that you have to journey with them every step of the way. I'm not saying that you're not entitled to your own response to how they're whatever. What I am saying though is that if you can't honor this person enough to say, hey, maybe I don't understand, but I love you enough to trust your process. Like, if you can't do that, then just walk away, bow out gracefully, and allow them to have their process without the pressure of you judging them for whatever that process looks like. Like, that's really all I can say about that.